Khan Academy volume, and we are working on the subtopic Decompose figures to find value. The figure below is made of two rectangular prisms. What's the volume of this figure? Okay, so what we're going to try to look at here is we're going to remember that this is really two separate shapes that have just been kind of pushed together. So this time they did not use different colors, but we can still use the different colors kind of in our head. So we are going to find the volume of this first part and then this second part, and then we'll have to add them together. So volume equals length times width times height. And for my first shape, I'm going to do kind of this longer, flatter one. Okay, so my length is 9, okay, because I'm only looking at how long this section is. Okay, so my length is 9. How far back does it go? Okay, that's labeled for us. My width is 10. And how tall is it? Height is 2. Okay, so our volume is going to be 9 times 10, which is 90, and then times 2 is 180. Okay, so for me, I like to go over here and just write that volume is 180. Okay, a little bit sloppy, but we get the idea. So that I know that this is 180 right here, and now I can kind of forget about that, because right now I don't care anymore. I need to find the volume of the second part. Okay, so I'm going to use a different color, but I'm going to still use my same volume equation. Length of the second one, okay, is just right here. We're not looking at this whole line. We're looking at just this shape right here. So we're kind of trying to ignore this other business. So my length is 3. Okay, and my width, how far back does that one go? Well, it's not labeled, and again, that's what can be tricky sometimes. Okay, but I have to remember I do need a width for volume. So my width is going to be the same as this flat figure down here. It goes back the same distance. So even though it's not labeled, my width is 10. And then how tall is that second shape? Okay, height is labeled, and that's 5. Okay, so my volume for the second shape is going to be 3 times 10, which is 30, times 5. So 30 times 5, to do that, I'm going to do 3 times 5, which is 15, and add a 0. So my volume of this shape is 150. Okay, that's a 5 there, even though I know it kind of got sloppy, but it's 150. So to figure out the volume of the entire figure, I'm going to have to do 180 plus 150. Okay, so I'm just adding those two volumes together. So 0 plus 0 is 0. And then 8 plus 5, I know those numbers got sloppy, I apologize. 8 plus 5 is going to be 13. And then 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. So my full volume is going to be 330 cubic centimeters. The figure below is made up of two rectangular prisms. What's the volume of this figure? Okay, so again, we're looking at this figure and we're going to just imagine it just how they had before, that these are two totally separate figures. We can think of it as green and orange like the other ones were in the other lesson. Okay, so the first thing I do, I know that I've got volume equals length times the width times the height. So I'm going to just start with this flat one again. So my length is 5. My width, how far back does it go? Width is 9. And my height, it's 2. So 5 times 9 is 45, times 2 is 90. So the volume of this one down here is 90. then I have to remember to go back and find the volume of this taller one. So the length here, they tell us, is 1. The width, they tell us, ooh, they do not tell us. So the width, again, we're going to look at this bottom one. It goes the same amount back. You can see they line up in the front and the back. So my width is going to be 9. And then my height, they do tell us, is 8. So my volume is 1 times 9, which is 9, times 8. So this one is 72. So to find the entire volume of the figure, I'm going to have to add 90 and 72. So when I add those two together, I get 0 plus 2 is 2, and I get 9 plus 7 is 16. So I get a final answer of 162. The figure below is made of 2 rectangular prisms. So again, same thing that we've been doing, but now this one looks a little bit different than what it did, than what some of the other ones did. So I'm still going to imagine these as 2 separate shapes. Okay, they're telling me that this whole length down here is 8. So I'm just going to kind of cut off and really focus on one shape at a time. Okay, don't let yourself get overwhelmed. Just focus on the one shape each time and try to kind of ignore the other second shape. Okay, we'll get to each of them as we go. So volume equals length times width times height. You know that's where I'm going. That's the first step every time. So just this front little version right here is what I'm looking at. So the length of that is 2. They tell us length is 2. And then they tell us how wide is it. Okay, well, it goes from here, back here, that's where I'm measuring. So the width is 6. And then how tall is it? Okay, when I look at just my front figure, they don't have that labeled. So I'm going to have to use some of my other numbers. I'm looking at how tall it is. Well, I can use this 5 because it's the same height throughout the entire figure. So I can use that 5. So my front little section here is 2 times 6 times 5. So 2 times 6 is 12. And then 12 times 5 is 60. So my volume of this front figure is 60. And again, I just write that down so that I can just be done with it and not have to even think about that again. And then I'm going to go back and now I have to find the volume of this back figure. So my length, okay, they tell us the length from here to here is 8. And my width on this figure, it goes back 1. And then my height is 5. So 8 times 1 is 8, times 5 is 40. So to find the entire volume, I have to add this figure to this figure. 60 plus 40 is 100 cubic inches. The figure below is made of 2 rectangular prisms. Find the volume. Okay, so again, we're going to kind of imagine that I've got that line here and that these are 2 separate figures. So I'm going to just look at my front figure to begin. But I always go back and write that equation so that I can kind of keep my numbers straight. A lot of kids like to try to do this in their head, and I understand that it's one extra step to write this down, but I really think it's beneficial to take the time to write everything down. The length of this first one is 9. Okay, and notice I'm not even worried about the back one yet. I'm just going step by step here. The width, so how far back does it go, is 6. And then my height. Well, my height is even throughout the whole figure, and it looks like the height is listed right here as 3. Okay, so for the first figure, I'm going to do 9 times 6, which is 54. and then I have to times 54 by 3. So 54 times 3, you may have to work that out, and that's okay. 54 times 3 is 162. And if you had to write that out on the side, that would be totally fine. And then my second figure in the back here, okay, they tell me that the length of this one is 10. Even though they labeled it in the back, okay, they're still telling me how long that figure is. So 10. And then how wide is it? Well, it goes back 7 inches. And how tall is it? The height is the same as the other one, which was 3. Okay, so for my back figure, I'm going to do 10 times 7, which is 70. And then 70 times 3 would be 210. And again, that one I can do in my head because when I'm thinking of 70 times 3, I'm going to do 7 times 3 is 21 and then add my 0 on. However, to figure out the entire volume, I still have to add those two numbers up. So this is not necessarily one of those things that is super hard and complicated. This is one of those things where there's a lot of steps and it's going to take you a little bit of time to solve each problem. So 0 plus 2 is 2. 1 plus 6 is 7. And then 2 plus 1 is 3. So my total volume here would be 372.